Yes. Last meeting of this current Council of Finance and Economy. First of all, just a brief statement on the protocols to be followed during this remote meeting. Please note the meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube and a recording will be made available for public viewing following the meeting. Can members please mute their microphones throughout the meeting when not speaking? This is important because it helps to ensure the quality of the audio for all present. Your microphone should be switched on when invited to speak and switched off when you have finished speaking. Please use the raised hand button to indicate you wish to speak at any point. Can I also ask that officers introduce themselves by confirming their name and role before speaking for the first time on any item? If any members lose connection or have any technical issues during the meeting, please alert the clerk as soon as possible, either using the chat function within the meeting or by email or phone. I will now ask the clerk to carry out a roll call of the elected members participating within the meeting or by email or phone. Thank you. David?
Thanks, Chair. I'll just confirm the members present. Councillor Berrell?
Present.
Councillor Brisley?
Present.
Councillor Farmer?
Present.
Councillor Laurie?
Yep, present.
Councillor MacDonald?
Present.
And Councillor Thompson?
Present.
Lovely, that's everyone present, Chair, and we have apologies from Councillor Benny with Councillor Berrell attending as substitute.
We also have apologies from Brian Roberts for being late, but he does intend to be here later in the meeting. So we perhaps should make a note of that as well. So that, are there any declarations of interest? I think I would have to declare an interest in item 12, Stirling Development Agency, as I'm one of the directors. Councillor Laurie?
Yep, Chair, also just to declare an interest in that item, I too am a director of SDA.
Thank you. I mean, it is a paper for noting, so it should be okay, but just to keep things right. There are no decisions to be taken on it. No other declarations of interest. No, there's no urgent business being brought forward. So we now go to item 4, which is the minutes of the 25th of November. I'll just go through them for accuracy. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. No matters of accuracy arising. So we're agreeing that is a true record of the meeting. Thank you. We're now on to the rolling action log, which is item 5. Are there any issues anyone wishes to raise on page, well, it'll be page 13 of the report? David?
Thanks, Chair. It was just to note that there's been 3 other further actions completed since the agenda was collated, so it was just to confirm the, first of all, the action at the bottom of the table on page 16, leading on to the top table on page 17, regarding economic development and tourism cost per 1,000. An email was issued on Monday this week to answer that. Also, the action at the bottom of the table on page 17 regarding in-year vacancy savings. There was an email issued on Tuesday to the members about that. And finally, the action at the table at the top of page 18 regarding flood alleviation scheme briefing note that was issued on Tuesday this week as well. So it'll be helpful if the committee are happy to consider those three actions as presented for removal as complete as well.
Good, that's fine. So we're quite happy with the action log. Councillor MacDonald?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say about the action log on the final page is talking about something in April. Now, and it talks about a meeting happening about that. So what's happening there? And also, as we're ending this group of this council and starting a fresh council, is there anything we want to tidy up on the action log in general, just to make sure that it's or add anything to the action log for the next set of councillors to pick up? Just a tidying up exercise is what I'm talking about.
Okay. Mr. Leslie?
Yeah, good morning. Drew Leslie, Senior Manager for Infrastructure. Councillor MacDonald, Action FE 275, that was a follow-on from the developer contributions paper that we took to F&E in November. So the planning service have agreed that they'll do a quarterly report to F&E members and provide an update on developer contributions throughout the year, and that'll just become an ongoing action that the service do, I think, along with an annual report to this committee as well. So that's why the first meeting's in, that's why the reference to April is there. That I think that'll be the first update that goes to members based on the report that was tabled in November.
There will be emailed essentially on that one.
Yeah, I think it'll be an email update report, and I think there'll be the offer of a briefing as well on it.
And on the more general point, is there anything we want to tidy up or hand on to the next council in this action log as we've got it in front?
I mean, I would suggest that this would be ongoing. Whatever is in here that isn't tidied up, you know, if there's any outstanding issues, it would carry on in the action log to the first F&E committee after the election. I think that might be the easiest way to do it. David, you wanted to come back in?
Thanks, Chair. It's just to say my understanding is the action logs won't actually transfer over to the new committees because they will be new committees established under the new council, but the action logs will still be dated, for example, following today's meeting, and services and CMT will still be prompted to complete all the actions that are on the current logs.
Right.
Okay, I think though it would be useful if within, I mean, I had presumed within the new council, whoever is chairing would be made aware of any issues that were outstanding, any matters not complete, particularly important issues. Drew? You're on mute, Drew.
Sorry, that was an old hand.
Right. Okay, so we know where we are with that one then. If it doesn't carry on, I think this is the first time we've had action logs. We didn't have them previously when a council finished, Councillor MacDonald. So sorry I wasn't aware. I just presumed that anything outstanding, particularly if it was important, officers would make the new members with responsibility aware, and I'm sure we can rely on the officers to do that. Okay, you wouldn't want us forgetting anything important. Right, we're now on to item 6, which is the general fund revenue budget projected outturn. Could I say that I would like to change or recommendation 4, which is to approve the transfer of £2 million of uncommitted reserves to the Transformation Fund. I've had a discussion with George this morning, and sorry I did inform Councillor Farmer and Councillor Laurie about this, but I think I would like to defer this, any further transfer, until we have a paper coming back outlining the various schemes that are ongoing, and also when we can expect to have some kind of realistic timetable of when we can expect to start to see any benefits or savings accrue from this. George has said that would not be a problem, but I think there are some of our schemes there's slight delays, and I think it might be good for members to have the up-to-date position on this before we transfer any further funds. George?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. Officers do recognise the need to develop processes to ensure, elected members have visibility over all of the Council's transformation programmes, and also the Council workforce strategy as well, and how that links in. So that'll include relevant investment requirements and also benefits realisation, as you quite rightly say. So the intention will be to bring an early paper back following the local government elections for member consideration.
Good. Councillor Beryl, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Could I just ask a point of order, I suppose, how this is to be dealt with under this agenda item? Are we simply just not going to move recommendation 4 and nothing will be recorded, or are we actually going to positively record what's just been said? Because I think it's an important principle that such very significant sums of public money are subjected to democratic scrutiny, and I would like it recorded that in effect that's the decision that we're taking today to be carried forward to the new council, not that we simply just don't have it on the agenda at all.
My intention was, well, I haven't got a written amendment to that, but it would be to defer the transfer of £2 million of uncommitted reserves to the transformation fund until such times as a more detailed report is presented to the new council, either council or the Finance and Economy Committee, whichever is the most suitable. I think that makes it quite clear. We don't want it forgotten about, but again, in terms of member scrutiny, it would also be good for any new members coming in, or members who haven't been on F&E before, that excuse me, that they understand exactly what is going on, because it is a fairly intensive piece of work. Do members agree with that?
Agreed.
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 Okay, thank you. Do you want to ask something else, Councillor Beryl? Or is that a legacy hand you've got?
Is my hand still up? Sorry, it must still be a legacy. Yes. Oh, sorry, yeah. Got rid of it
right. Now I've dealt with that. George, do you want to take us through the report then?
Yes, thank you, Chair. George Murphy, Interim Chief Finance Officer. So this report outlines the General Fund revenue budget predicted outturn position for the current year. Services are reporting a net overspend position of £4.7 million. This is made up of two elements: £5.4 million of additional COVID-related costs, which are partly offset by an underspend of £700,000 from business as usual activities. In addition to the service outturn position, health and social care partnership budgets are now reporting a break-even position. The Scottish Government have committed to underwrite the partnership's financial impact for 21-22, which continues to be severely impacted by the pandemic. Corporate areas of the budget are showing loan charges savings of £750,000, additional Scottish Government grant funding of £5.7 million, and the transfer of £1.6 million from COVID earmarked reserves to support related pressures. These favourable balances are being partially offset by various one-off costs, which are set out within the main body of the report and also the appendix. Taking all of these into account, this will leave projected uncommitted reserves at 9.4 million at the end of the financial year, which includes the ongoing commitment to fund the remaining £629,000 revenue element of the Branchow and Catterburn Bridges maintenance works. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you very much, George. Any questions to George on the report? I don't see any. Councillor MacDonald?
I thought we should ask some questions of it. I was just wondering on things like, it was really more the service managers about some of these overspends and the COVID impacts, what we're doing to now change those, because, for example, waste services is still spending a fortune on pool cars and extra staff, and I'd like to look at that. I'm also a bit concerned about the underspends in education and children and families, so I just like some words on those subjects. Thank you.
Okay, if you would like to go first. Which officer? Marie?
So Marie Valenti, and Senior Manager Children and Families and Justice Social Work and Chief Social Work Officer. So as you can see in the report, Councillor MacDonald, some of the underspend is linked to the fact that we have done significant work on still continuing to prevent young people going into external placements. So that transformation work and rebalancing work continues. However, we're having to set aside some monies. The numbers of children and the young people in these placements, they're all getting older, so the demand is changing, so we're having to find supported accommodation for them. So that monies that are in underspend will be spent in the future to provide accommodation for them which they need, and it's a different type of accommodation than they're currently in. So we also need to keep a careful eye on our kinship care monies, because that is actually that section of the budget is an overspend because we've placed more children with their families, which is good. And also we haven't been able to provide the children with disabilities care packages totally throughout COVID. You'll see it's a 70% figure, so it's rising, and we're working very hard on that with our commission providers, and we do expect that to rise significantly. And actually that's an area of projected budget pressure, because though the numbers of those children are rising significantly. So I suppose to answer your question in summary, the reason for that underspend is linked to the good work that we're doing in transformation, but we are keeping a close eye on those projected demands that are going to basically get worse, and also to advise you that we have significant work to do on the promise to scope out what we need to do there and what it's going to cost. And also there's new legislation and policy coming in with regard to those youngsters from 16 to 18 who will be referred into the hearing system and not through the adult justice system. So they will not begin into Parliament in the future. If they're having to be incarcerated, it will be secure care for young people, but we are hopeful that we can provide alternatives to that going forward. So a very complicated picture, and I hope that answers your question.
Adding a bit more colour to that, I think that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Now there was also a question on waste. Bruce?
Thank you, Councillor Brisley. Thanks, Councillor MacDonald, for the question. Obviously, a number of, it's Bruce Rickey, Senior Manager for Environment and Place. Obviously, a number of the frontline services, whether that be roads, land or waste services, have been adversely impacted by COVID over a period of time. What we've done in terms of that is take very much a risk-based approach to ensure the health, safety and well-being of our staff and our employees. Part of that is obviously utilisation of pool car vehicles, additional minibus vehicles to actually transport people to sites or to carry out their duties as well. That's been very much in terms of covering sickness absence and obviously for people having to self-isolate as well. We continue to keep that situation under review, Councillor MacDonald, in terms of the prevailing conditions of the pandemic, and that bit of work is ongoing at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. And just the final question about the education, I think it'd be helpful to understand a bit more about schools and learning and the underspend there.
Sorry, it's Carla Morrow here. I'm BGE team leader in education. I'm here on behalf of Bryony today, so I apologise. I probably don't have the detail that Bryony would be able to give you on this subject, but I am aware that there are real pressures in terms of vacancy management in schools, and it's more because business as usual information can't, we can't do the normal vacancy management. Lots of our senior leaders are covering classes because the number of teachers and supply is difficult to get. So it's really around and about vacancy management that the underspend is there.
And there's a recruitment drive, presumably. Is that happening?
Apologies, I didn't hear that.
Is there a recruitment drive then to resolve that?
Yes, ongoing across the different services are trying to recruit, working very hard to try and recruit additional teachers and supply teachers, etc., into the system.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beryl.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Page 33, the Health and Social Care Partnership. While it's good to see that the Scottish Government are going to in effect underwrite the projected overspends, I'm just wondering what that's going to look like long term, because there's a comment in passing that overspends may have been affected by the pandemic. At this point, is it possible to disentangle long-term structural issues from short-term temporary additional costs arising from COVID?
Anyone care to answer that question? Isabel?
Isabel McKnight, Chief Operating Officer, Communities and Partnerships. Unfortunately, I don't think there's anyone here from the Health and Social Care Partnership. Probably you are able, Councillor, to disentangle that, but it's very, very complex, I believe, but we will discuss the question with our Health and Social Care Partnership colleagues, because they do have a comprehensive transformation programme to try and mitigate some of the risks around the increased demand. And of course, we're still, as all of us are still working through COVID, but we'll take that back to them and we'll ask them to respond. But I'm quite sure they're able to do that, although it's very complicated. And as I say, it's maybe a combination of what they're trying to do in terms of transformation as well as the increased demand while working through COVID. So it is quite a complex picture. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm absolutely sure it is extremely complex, and unfortunately, they're not here to answer it. But it's very cynical of me. But it's just so easy now to say everything's due to COVID. And I would have thought there were some longer-term structural problems there with the whole setup. But yeah, it'd be interesting. I'd be glad to see any response from them. Thank you.
Can I just also add, there has been the complexity of the issues throughout. Commission services, the pressure that they've been under. So there's also been the council itself has been probably pushed to mitigate some of the risk around our commission services working through that COVID structure, and also the pressures that the hospital brings. So, but we'll take that question back. Thank you.
And Marie, you wanted to come in?
Yes, Marie Valenda, Chief Social Work Officer. Sorry, I was just about to say exactly what Isabel has just said. I was at a session yesterday afternoon on their transformation plans, and there's a lot of work streams that are looking primarily at trying to enhance care at home and reduce residential care. But I don't have the detail that you would need, Councillor Beryl. That would have to come from my colleagues. Thank you.
So can we ask that excuse me, information when it's available is circulated to all members of the committee?
Yes.
You're on mute, Isabel.
Apologies. I'll take that as an action, Councillor.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions on this report? No. So do we agree the recommendations then with the amendment to recommendation 4?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. We're now on to agenda item 7, which is the General Services Capital Programme 21-22 Progress Report. I think this is you again, George.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Quite briefly, this report provides committee with an update on the delivery of the General Services Capital Programme for 21-22. The report outlines that the core funded programme is currently projected to be 5.5 million underspent, with the overall capital programme currently projected to be 12.3 million underspent. The underspent position continues to be directly influenced by the unprecedented nature of the COVID pandemic and the worldwide shortage of raw materials and cost increases. There is reference in the report to an officer working group which has now been established, and that group continues to assess the impact of material lead times, shortages and price volatility. And it's also focusing on what mitigating actions can be taken by the Council to minimise impacts to Stirling Council and its capital delivery plan, particularly as we move into the financial year 22-23. The report also seeks committee approval to agree delegated authority to relevant officers for the award of the contract for Drummond Nursery, which exceeds £1 million. Both myself and other colleagues will be happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Councillor Barrow.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Page 47, it mentions that there are developer contributions of 2.275 million as yet unallocated. That seems fair enough for amounts received during the current financial year, but it also seems to mention that there are amounts from previous financial years. And how much of that sum relates to money received in previous years, and why is it that they haven't yet been allocated?
Drew, you want to come in?
Yeah, Councillor Beryl. In terms of the developer contributions, yes, that figures is the whole picture of developer contributions that the council have received, and that would cover the likes of education and transport in the main. Some of these allocations will be for general, perhaps supporting Stirling City transport strategy or local transport strategy. They'll have fairly broad allocations. We did set out in the report to committee in November a lot of detail around what the developer contributions that had been received in the last 3 years were, and how those were or had been spent in the previous year as well. So there is a fair bit of detail around them. The service have done a lot of work ensuring that contributions are correctly allocated and planned for. A lot of those allocations are already planned in. We've got school extension pressures that we know will require investment, so those allocations are aligned to them. So, and the point that Councillor MacDonald raised in the rolling action log, there'll be a briefing note coming out to members quarterly with that information as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you. A couple of points. I welcome the fact that Strategic Timber Transport Fund is now baked in, and that's something that we always look for, that funding, and I hope we can look for more funding programs like that. So I just wanted to mention that. In Doon, there's quite a lot of projects sort of ongoing, but not quite complete, and it's just technical stuff that could be finished. But also there's that car park that needs some money to put into it. St Kesog's and other projects like that, where we're trying to design a building for new purposes. I still never quite got an idea of where the COVID impact was and how that would change designs going forward, had affected that and many other projects, and that's something that concerns me. And somebody can talk on that, but my final question would be on. I thank David Hopper for providing me answers on the EV fee charging system. I just hope that comes forward as soon as possible in the next council, because we won't be able to keep paying out for all this electricity and infrastructure if we don't actually charge a little bit for that. So if you can answer those points, thank you.
Drew.
Yep, Councillor MacDonald, picking up on maybe queries around how COVID have impacted projects that are in development. I think it's quite clear and this is across the board, I'm perhaps speaking from my background in infrastructure, both outside in the council and outside, that where there's been complex projects that have needed site surveys, that have needed collaboration, people to get around the table. That has not happened, and some of these projects have really struggled to solve some of the more technical problems related to projects. I think Keswick is a good example where a number of partners are coming together to share a limited space on what is technically quite a difficult building to develop, mainly around the likes of fire strategy and the sharing of space. And these things, we've struggled with that, to do that, in an online environment. And also there was times when we couldn't go out and do site surveys and the like because of the health protection regulations. So that has been an impact on the broader. There is a broader resource challenge. Getting a hold of consultants through frameworks is not easy. Booking in consultant time is a real challenge. A lot of the consultants now are, they're no longer sitting waiting for the council, to instruct them. You need to give them up to 2-3 months lead to start working on a project. And that has happened over the course of the pandemic, but has also been an impact of Brexit as well. So a number of challenges.
Just to clear something, what I'm looking for is, no, I appreciate COVID has slowed down a lot of these projects, so I'm completely on the same page on that. But what I was thinking of was that when you're designing a building where you might have hot desking and the pass rails close together, might that change under COVID? And actually, how are we inputting that into our projects, that the design of how people are spaced out is completely different? Is that something that's affecting? Is that something worked out yet? It's basically what I'm trying to find out.
I don't think the COVID regulations as such have got into the detail of workspace arrangements. I think what has likely is more relation to how people are going to work in the future. So people are, all people that hold assets are considering how we use our offices in the future. At the moment there are quite a lot of issues around ventilation, and landlords are having to invest in ventilation requirements. So spacing, no, but the mechanical and electrical systems that support these buildings is having to be reviewed.
Okay, and just a final comment from David Hopper, if there's anything more he wants to say on electrical vehicle charging, because I think that's quite an important point to make sure that infrastructure is sustainable.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. It's David Hopper, Service Manager for Public Transport and Sustainable Development. Yeah, I gave a response. The outline of that response to your question, Councillor, was that we are developing an electric vehicle policy, which looks at the whole issue in the round, not just about tariffs per se, and working closely through the Cities Alliance that we get a kind of conjoined approach across Scotland as best we can. It's important to recognise that there's volatility in the energy markets at the moment, and we're keen to see a degree of, I don't think we're going to see stability, but then an idea of what energy prices are likely to do, and in particular electricity prices are likely to do in the future. Once we've got that understanding, then we will look to set the tariff appropriately. It's likely that will be done towards the next opportunity beyond fees and charge setting next month would be within 6 months' time, so it's likely to happen towards the end of the summer. But it is important to recognise the growth of EV cars at the moment is one in 7 cars that were sold new in January this year was an electric car. So the growth is extraordinary. So it is something that we're focused on and keen to get resolved.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments on the capital programme? So do we agree all the recommendations, including agreeing the delegated authority for the award of the contract for Drummond Nursery? Yes? Agreed? Fine. Silence is assent. Thank you. We're now on to item 8, which is a performance and strategic priorities report. Who's taking us through this one? Is it Isabel?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Isabel McKnight, Chief Operating Officer, Communities and Performance. This is our standing item on the agenda, and this report provides information and updates on each of the key indicators, and there are officers on the call who will be able to answer any questions that any member of the committee has. Thank you.
Thanks, Isabel. First of all, any questions from members? I mean, it's a fairly comprehensive report as normal. Councillor MacDonald? You're on mute, Councillor MacDonald.
I'd like to ask a question about broadband. I see the figures are very good. We're up to 95% for rural businesses access to superfast broadband, but I'd just like a picture of where we're going with rolling out broadband and how we can tackle that difficult 5%.
Anyone want to? Stephen MacDonald?
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Councillor MacDonald, for the question. Steve MacDonald, Service Manager, Economic Growth, Culture, Tourism and Events. So, as you know, we've got both capital and revenue support to roll out our support to the broadband scheme. So, the officer is kind of proactively identifying these areas where we don't have coverage and doing what we can to engage with these communities and businesses. So, that work will continue alongside the national programme. So we are kind of trying to target these areas and build a bit of capacity to put solutions in place.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Beryl?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Page 70, the absence figures. I'm just wondering, a similar question before in the context of COVID, whether we can disentangle factors and figures due to COVID from the underlying rates. Do we know of those figures, how much of it was directly or indirectly due to COVID? And if somebody who cannot work from home has to self-isolate but isn't actually ill, does that go down as a sickness absence?
Who's going to answer that question? Pamela?
Yes, I can assist. Pamela Forsyth, HR Business Partner Manager. We do have, it's quite a manual process, but we are able to separate out and identify absences due to COVID and self-isolations in regards to COVID. So, Councillor Bell, we are able to separate those out if need be, and we did that in the annual report last year, and we'll do that this year as well, just to make that really clear.
Okay. Is that okay?
Oh yeah. Sorry, there's just my other question, that if somebody is required to self-isolate but doesn't actually have any symptoms, doesn't in fact have COVID, but that person cannot work from home, does that go down as a sickness absence?
No, we record it so that we know that they're off for that reason, but it doesn't go against their sickness record in terms of the processes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald?
Yeah, just two final points. Some questions around the there are some questions around the timescale for complaints. That was a bit of a concern. I see that's getting worse, actually. So a comment on that, and also let's end on a positive note and see what new events are being attracted to the area for the coming year.
Who wants to come in there? And do you want to make any comment? Steve, your hand's still up.
Yeah, I'll just come back on the events one. So Steve MacDonald again, Service Manager, Economic Growth, Culture, Tourism and Events. So a bit the event sector is obviously one that's been hit particularly bad by the COVID regulations. So we can't really say too much on the call today, but we do have a plan in place for a programme of counter-run events that we'll put in place for this year. And we're also engaging with promoters and national agencies to try and attract events back to Stirling. So we do have a plan in place, but yeah, announcements will be forthcoming.
Thank you. Is there anything on the complaints, Matt? Question?
Yeah, Councillor MacDonald, Drew Leslie, Senior Manager for Infrastructure. I can pick up a couple of the targets that haven't been missed around that issue have been in my area. Some of them probably relating to planning and building standards and environmental health, where there've been relatively technical complaints and they've taken a little bit more time, and just down to staff pressures too. We try, we do have a weekly focus on it now, and working to make sure that we get these out on time. But they have been, we have had a dip, but we have got it under review as well.
Okay, thank you very much. That helps.
That okay?
Councillor Brisley, sorry, it's Bruce Rickey here, Senior
Yes.
Manager for Environment and Place. Just in terms of the complaints response as well, that covers a couple of my areas as well. A lot of that has been down to staff absences because of COVID-related symptoms or self-isolation. We've got a plan of action in place though to catch back up with a number of those inquiries and complaints that are coming through, and we'll be working our way through that through the early part of this year.
Thanks, that's good to hear.
Okay, now I know that Jim Thompson wanted to come in. Did you want to add something to that, Isabel, before I let Councillor Thompson in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It might also be good just for members to understand that during January and February of 2022, we've had the highest number of COVID absence that we've ever had since the beginning of the pandemic. So that maybe gives you a picture in terms of why some of these issues might be coming more to the surface. But thankfully, over the past week or two, that figure has started to climb down. But it just probably gives you better insight into the impact that COVID is actually having on our workforce. I think it was just good for me to point that out. Thank you.
Thanks, Isabel. It certainly was a question that was coming into my mind, because I think often people think COVID's over now, but it's far from it. I think people aren't becoming as seriously ill or being hospitalised, but certainly I hear of more and more cases all the time. So, and obviously that's got to affect our workforce. So that's very useful to know, and I think it puts it in context for us all. Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. It's page 71, the stage 1 and 2 complaints. I suspect I'll not be able to get an answer here today, but there must be a complexity in some of these that mean they'll take longer. But could somebody give me a flavour of which services the complaints are coming in, so we could know which, if there is a need to target anything?
Bruce?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Brisley. Yeah, I think, Councillor Thompson, a number of those sort of complaints will be coming through Environment and Place because of the frontline nature of the services. A number of the inquiries and complaints do come through that service area as well. As I mentioned to Councillor MacDonald, we're currently looking at the sort of processes that sit behind that, just to see where we can streamline. As I say, there was also impacts in terms of staff absences that have contributed to that performance as well, but that's certainly something that we're looking to rectify in the coming weeks and months.
Okay, Isabel?
Apologies, I was just going to say we can get that information. We do have that information. I think it's probably some of the larger numbers are across 2 or 3 different services, but there is a focus. That's the way we kind of manage it, Councillor. We have a focus, and the team focus on that particular area. But as you can imagine, a lot of these are front-facing services, as Bruce says, and I know there's smaller numbers in Health and Social Care Partnership, but that's where you would expect to find some of those numbers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Isabel. Any further comments, questions? No. So we agree to note the report. Agreed. Thank you very much. We're now on to item 9, which is a contract to supplier management framework annual report. Nick, can you take us through this one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Nick Hyde, Head of Procurement. So the report looks at progress further embedding the contract and supplier management framework over the last year. It's an annual report. We'll be bringing a further update to this committee next February 2023. The CSM framework has been in place since 2018, and obviously quite rightly we spend a lot of time focusing on further embedding CSM across the council. A brief update in terms of the last 12 months or so. All new contracts over £50,000 are now risk assessed based on complexity and risk to the council, and are therefore then assessed as strategic, managed or routine. Depending on how that assessment comes out informs how we manage the contract going forward. And in addition to that, all new contracts now at procurement strategy stage have a contract manager from within the service identified and a contract manager from within my team identified. And the procurement strategy will also then set out roles and responsibilities, and where those roles and responsibilities split between either the contract manager from my team or the contract manager from the service. That's all I wanted to say at the report. I'll open up to questions from members.
Thank you, Nick. Can I ask you one question? And it's on page 80, 1.3.2, and it's about applying the fair work practice requirements to procurements and promoting the adoption of the living wage. Are we as a council able to say, and I'm sure I read somewhere that other councils will only grant contracts as part of the conditions of contract that the successful person does pay the living wage?
So yes, Councillor, it's an interesting question. The Scottish Government issued an advice note towards the end of last calendar year, suggesting that councils are now able to mandate such criteria. We're still working through that because it's quite complex. They didn't change the legislation. There has been no change to the legislation. Therefore, the legislation sets out that those criteria can only be used when it is directly relatable to the outcome of the contract on a proportionality basis. So we're still kind of working through what that guidance note from the Scottish Government meant to us as a council. And then we will, once we've worked through that, we will engage with legal colleagues to make sure that the council stays on the right side of the legislation, but continues to do as much as we possibly can around mandating living wage.
Thank you. I mean, certainly it's something that I would be, and I'm sure many of the elected members would be very keen to see. If we are legally able to do it, that would make such a difference to the people who work for contractors.
Yes, yes, in essence, Councillor, yes, I completely agree. Obviously, Isabel and I have had a couple of chats since that note came out, and we're looking into the detail. In the fullness of time, I'm sure we'll bring a paper back to the F&E committee, etc., to look at how we're going to manage it. Once we've worked, as I said, worked through the detail, seen what that actually means from a legal and legislation point of view, and obviously engage with legal colleagues to make sure we're kept right.
Thank you. Isabel, did you want to come in there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just to assure you that there's other creative ways of ensuring that our commission services pay the living wage. So, and we do that through some of the evaluation questions that we pose to potential bidders. So we do that in a kind of creative way without getting into the technical detail. But of course, it's been made slightly easier by the recent, what we would call SSPN note from the Scottish Government, but as Nick quite rightly says, legislation hasn't changed, but we continue to do our creative ways and it's been very fruitful, to be fair. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it might be useful to have some form of briefing note to members if it's not creating too much additional work, just for us to have an idea, because I think it is a concern that for members, we would want to ensure that we as a council are doing all that we possibly can. So just to be brought up to speed with what the officers are, the thinking and the ways that we manage to do that would be really useful for members until such times as we get a paper coming back to a future committee once all the ramifications have been worked out, the legal requirements, etc. But I think I saw quite a few nodding heads from the elected members when I was speaking, when I mentioned it, and I think it's something that we would be very keen to see happening. Councillor Farmer and then Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, just to follow on from that, I mean, surely there can be legal advice gained from Scottish Government as to how they foresee their advice note being implemented. And in terms of how you described it, Nick, as being in relation to the outcome of the contract and the proportionate benefits thereof, surely if you're paying the living wage, that's going to be beneficial to those that are involved in the contract, and the outcome of the contract, because of the additionality of economic activity created by the people getting higher wages, that in itself would justify the insistence. Although one can nuance the words, but to pay the living wage. So it'd just be interesting to get that sort of feel as to how, yes, we have been doing it creatively for some time. It's made easier, as Isabel has pointed out. But just if there's any sort of legal advice from Scottish Government, because after all, they have drafted the advice. So I would have thought their legal teams would have went through it with a fine tooth comb, and any sort of advice from them, I think, would be helpful.
Yeah, if I could just answer that question briefly. I know Isabel's got her hand up, but we are, Councillor Farmer, in constant dialogue with Scotland Excel, who are the Centre of Excellence for Procurement, as you know, who are directly in dialogue with Scottish Government on this matter. And I know that there's a paper, Scotland Excel paper, going to their board, I believe next week, on the matter. So they've been creating that link to the Scottish Government for us, and we're in constant dialogue with Scotland Excel on the matter as well, just as things get a little bit clearer. So yes, sorry, I'll hand over to Isabel. I know she's
Isabel.
Yeah, it's probably just to respond to Councillor Farmer's question. I think, to be fair, if I'm going to be quite honest, I think what the Scottish Government's briefing note allows councils to do is what we were doing already, is around just what you've articulated. It's around making sure that they can deliver the outcomes and recruit. So a lot of that is dependent on recruitment. I think the best way is to put some of the finer detail and the technical detail into a briefing note, as the chair has requested, because I think that gives us opportunity. Because I think a lot of councils are really worried around the risk, and I think, but again, as Nick says, we are working with Scotland Excel, the heads of procurement, but actually some of those other local authorities have been coming to us for some advice around some of the creative ways we've worked through our evaluation process and our method statements. So I think, to be fair, to give you an insight in terms of some of the things we've done in the past, and as those creative ways have we discussed, then it'd be quite good for you guys to see that in a note.
Good. Thanks, Isabel. Councillor MacDonald now.
Thank you, and thanks for asking those questions. I think that was helpful to hear about living wage. I wanted to welcome the local supplier forum. I think that's good. One of the things I was thinking of is, in recent years, we've had difficulties with buildings, and I was thinking about services, buildings, products that we procure. and that later turn out that there are issues that were baked in at the beginning, and we have had to sue people and all sorts of stuff. So what I wanted to try and understand is there anything in this framework that helps make that less likely that we get into a situation where later down the line something's gone wrong and we actually have to go down a legal route? Are there protections we're going to put in about clerks of works and really checking the services and products we get?
Thank you, Councillor. It's a good question. So I think for me, that kind of contract would naturally be risk assessed as strategic. Therefore, there would be constant dialogue between my team, the service lead and the supplier. If something came through, hopefully you'd be able to use that process of constant dialogue to mitigate that. That also, in fairness, does not say that we will never come across issues that nobody foreseen coming. These things unfortunately do happen occasionally, but the intention through the framework is to keep that constant dialogue going with the supplier, almost during a strategically important contract on a partnership basis, so that we work through issues together.
So that's discussion, or is there some sort of quality control person put in place, or how does that?
Yeah. There's quality controls, there's regular reporting, that kind of thing, just to support and make sure, because it's when you get to those stages in the contract, councillor, it's not in the council's interest or the contractor's interest half the time to leave these things alone.
I think that's helpful. Thanks for that.
Thank you. If that's all the questions, can we agree the 2 recommendations? Yes. Thank you very much. We're now on to item 10, hybrid working principles. Is that you, Pamela? Or
it is indeed. Pamela Forsyth, HR Business Partner Manager. I'm really excited to be able to bring this to yourselves today, because it's a really unique opportunity for us to, as a council, look at how we work, and also for us to be able to really properly look at how we're delivering services. And we've had a rubbish couple of years, but there's been a lot of good practice in there. And what we, I suppose, are hoping to do now is to take advantage of the good practice, and also to make sure that we also take advantage of how people are now thinking about their work, about looking at work as not just a place that you go, but as a thing that you do, and all of the elements that come in that. So, and you'll see that's reflected in what I'm going to speak to you about today. And the hybrid working principles that I've brought forward on behalf of the New Ways of Working group, it focuses on kind of a first part of that whole process. And the hybrid working looks at splitting your work between a workplace and working remotely, something that a large proportion of our workforce has been doing over the last couple of years. What the phase 1 principles bring to services is the ability to move that work forward a bit more formally, and to think about hybrid working, what it means for their service delivery, how to make that better, how to build on the improvements that we've done, and also to have corresponding benefits on the people that work in those service areas as well. And to not apply that to service areas, but allow them to build what that looks like for themselves and where it can work well for themselves. What I would say about the principles is, unlike kind of probably a lot of the policies that I'll bring forward here, is it's not about providing all of the answers and trying to cover all the bases. So it was probably a bit of a move from what the kind of policies I would normally bring forward. And what the group's tried to do is provide a framework that helps services inform what future delivery is going to look like, and is collaborative in its approach. It was developed with our trade unions. It's about what fits service delivery for our customers, and hopefully when services come back with what that will look like for them, it will vary across different services in terms of who can work in a hybrid manner, what that will actually look like on those services, and what it will do for us as a council. And this links back into some of the conversations you've been having up to this point, is what we need to do in terms of our people, HR policies and processes, but also the IT side of things and the property information that we need to have to allow us to work in the manner that we want to do going forward. And for me, as we work through that process and hopefully come back in the future with something that is more concrete in terms of a policy and what we want to do, that'll make us get that right rather than, you know, having iterations that are wrong. But also the way of working like that gives us a template to take this type of work forward through those areas and services which can't normally work in a hybrid manner, and also allow them to have the benefits of agile working in some shape or form. And so this whole approach could inform our whole workforce and all our services going forward, with the ultimate aim is we get all of the benefits of better services for our better services for our communities and our people, but also better well-being, better opportunities for better work-life balance, supporting people with care and disabilities, but also retaining staff and being what we really say we want to be, which is an employer of choice, and also meeting some of our strategic goals, our thriving communities, thriving workforce and thriving organisations. So I suppose in some ways putting our money where our mouth is and being able to make our services better and take our people along in a way that benefits all. So I hope you'll be able to support that approach. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Pamela. Certainly I was very interested to read this, and I like the way we're approaching building it up, starting with the principals, all the consultation that's going on, and not rushing to have some kind of policy, because I suppose we're still finding out a great deal. You know, we've a lot to find out yet as to what is the best way of working and what are the more creative ways, as you mentioned, particularly in areas where normally you wouldn't think that there could be too much scope for agile working. So I look forward, and I hope that members will be kept informed on a regular basis as we go along as to what the progress is and where we are. Not that I'm looking to rush to get a policy in place. I'm not. I think it's the right approach. This is different from anything we've ever done before, and we want to try as far as possible to get things right. But thanks for all the work that officers are putting into this. Councillor Beryl, then Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Could I strike a bit of a grumpy note here? Apologies in advance to Pamela. I do recognise the positives in this, and I've had experience even before COVID myself of the benefits of working from home on occasion. But it's not always beneficial. It's not always beneficial to the customers, and it's not always beneficial to the individual employee. And I would have hoped that this paper might have recognised a little bit more about some of the potential risks at both sides, because we've all had experience now in our daily lives of receiving a service, whether it's from the bank or a doctor's surgery or whatever, whether the service we're receiving is very much inferior because somebody has the benefit of working from home. And I was speaking to somebody who's phoned the doctor, had an online consultation, and it turns out the doctor didn't actually have access to that patient's records at home. That seems an extreme case, but I think there are risks there. There are risks to the level of service that we provide, and there may be even potential risks to the morale of employees at home. I appreciate they'll be given, I'm sure they'll be given a choice in future, but in many cases, it doesn't suit people to work from home. They're missing out on those essential working relationships and camaraderie and all the interpersonal things that you don't even notice until they're not there. So I just want to strike a note of caution, and I would hope that adequate recognition is being given to the risks both to the level of service and to the well-being of our employees.
Thank you, Alistair. Certainly in informal discussions I've had, both with Pamela and the Chief Executive, when this has come up, I think officers are well aware, Councillor Beryl, about some of the disadvantages and how home working doesn't suit everyone. They've talked about it all the way along the line, and I'm sure working with staff and the trade union colleagues, that's why it was very clear to say, I don't want this rushed. This is something that's going to evolve to allow all the positives but also how we can mitigate any disadvantages where possible, but mainly to be well aware of them. So I don't think, my understanding is that officers are well aware of some of the disadvantages as well as advantages. Did you want to add anything, Pamela, before I let Councillor MacDonald come in?
Yes, I would. Thanks very much. I would. I don't think it's grumpy comments at all. I think they're realistic comments, and I think it's something that we are, as Councillor Brisley says, very aware of. There's a lot in what you say. There's a lot in there about what suits our service delivery and what doesn't, what can suit some individuals and what doesn't. But I am very clear, and the document is very clear about the emphasis in service delivery and what supports that and improves it. And as far as possible, being able to get all of the wellbeing benefits out of that at the same time. We will have supporting guidelines that document in much more detail our approach to checking all of those types of things, and also being very clear of the reality about what we can do and what services can operate in a hybrid fashion and which ones can, and being very realistic and upfront about our discussions around that, but also making sure that we are looking after the people who have real challenges in being at home and for whatever reason do not wish to be there. So please be reassured that we are very aware and have cognizance of all of those issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald?
I have similar feelings about all this. I think there are lots of positives. I think working from home can be very good. But at the same time, there's a number of issues that this throws up that could be negative. So, I mean, for example, on page 96, it talks about mileage transport costs will not be paid for journeys from home to council office. Well, it says will not. I would hope that if we were putting an employee out of pocket by making them travel somewhere to do something, that would still be in place. And you also allude to the fact in the insurance that we wouldn't be liable for the insurance. There are additional costs for someone working at home to have the space, to have the electricity, to have the insurance, to have all that kind of stuff on it. And I'm also concerned, yes, about the isolation and not being in that team. And I would hope that if you do this, that there is a way of bringing the teams together in person now and then. And also, I'm concerned about the idea of it potentially creating a two-tier workforce where, as you well know, you can't collect the bins from home or build a road from home, but you can do some admin work from home. So I would worry about separating the workforce in that way. So I know I've thrown up a lot of points there, but maybe if you could make some comments on those to look at that.
Yeah, happy to do so. Right, there's quite a lot in there. There is a lot of things at the moment that we are where we are, and a lot of discussions to come from some of that. So what we've set up at the moment is a framework which might change as we move through this process. And I think we've said up front in the first page of the report that some of those things will be developed as we go along. In terms of mileage from home to office, that's kind of not any different than it is at the moment. So you would normally travel in and out of the office. And then if you were then travelling in an excess manner, then you would be recompensed for that. So that's not any different. It doesn't negate anybody than it would normally in that respect. And we obviously have the council pool cars. But again, that's some of the detail that will come in future discussion and some of the guidelines. In terms of the insurance, we do have names of a number of providers who don't pay additional costs. And hopefully in terms of equipment, desk chairs and all of that, we have the ability to provide people with the equipment they need. And granted, as we move through this process, we'll be looking at all of those kinds of other technology and needs that people might have going forward. I absolutely hear you on the isolation thing. I think even for those of us who can work at home all the time reasonably comfortably, and for my team in HR, I've been actually surprised at how much we've really been able to do online. But we also we're on our own a lot as well. And I think everybody feels, especially now, the kind of the detriment of that. And I think one of the reasons, Isabel talked earlier about the COVID still being high, that's one of the reasons that we're also trying to protect people in their return and the desire to come back and collaborate. You know, we do that at a reasonable pace and do it safely. So absolutely hear you on that one. And the two-tier workforce is a really, really interesting one, and one that we're really going to explore going forward. One of the reasons why I spoke earlier on about this is the hybrid is only the first element of it. I'm very aware there's a huge part of our workforce that can't work in that style. So what can they do? But there's also a knock-on effect for people who have had the ability to work at home with all the benefits that can bring. I think it's often been described as sleeping at work rather than working at home. And my physio said to me that actually sitting is the new smoking. So there's pros and cons for all of us and how we work, and what we need to do going forward is address all of those things as best as we can and be as flexible and inclusion in this process with everybody as far as we can, but also being realistic about what we can and can't do that protects our services and gives us the best service delivery that we can.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other further comments? No, I think that was a useful discussion, and we agree that the recommendation is consider and comment, but I think we're all agreed that the work that's ongoing is good work.
Yep.
And I certainly look forward. We agree the principles that are set down by officers, and I look forward to the next update to see where we're getting and what of the problems that have been highlighted. And again, it wasn't in a grumpy manner. Realistic problems that are there that people face. Okay, we're now on to item 11, the city centre strategy. Is it Stuart or is it Keir, or who's taking this one forward for us?
Yeah, good morning, Councillor. Stuart Oliver here, Senior Manager for Economic Development and Communities. Morning, members. So this paper brings forward a new city centre strategy and a company and action plan, which has been developed with our key partners and which seeks to meet the challenges facing our city centre and to support all opportunities to strengthen it. So the committee has asked to approve both the strategy and the company and action plan for 22-23. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any comments? First of all, any questions to Stuart? First of all, Councillor MacDonald.
This is sort of a point about I'm concerned about coming forward. We're potentially going to have charging for businesses' parking spaces. We might even eventually have a charge for coming into the city centre. I don't know if that will happen, but I would be concerned about potentially things like that undermining some of the good work you're doing in this. And I worry about how some of these things could affect these great plans you've got.
Do you want to comment, Stuart?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'm aware of some of the things that you're referring to in terms of some of the policies and interventions that have been discussed broadly in terms of things that happen in cities. I think for my part, that's not on the radar for Stirling at the moment, and scale wise, it's something that I think certainly in terms of a congestion or an entry charge, I couldn't myself see. Ultimately, that wouldn't be my decision, but I think it's never been discussed here, and I wouldn't expect that to be the case. And yeah, so that's all I can offer at the moment, Councillor.
Okay, Councillor Farmer.
Yeah, just to come back in that, I mean, there's been a call for many years for local government to be given more fiscal powers, but it is up to the individual local authorities as to what fiscal powers they so choose to use. And therefore, it would be up to a future council to decide whether any charges or any congestion charges or any fiscal range of fiscal measures that are at our disposal would be utilised. And that would be through the normal democratic process. So I'm sure there'd be robust debate around that. But certainly there's no appetite in this current council to be looking at any of those fiscal measures. But certainly, in principle, I welcome the opportunity that those fiscal measures are there at our disposal if a future council so wishes to use them.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, Councillor Farmer's covered part of what I wanted to say, but my question to Stuart, and it's maybe not one that we can agree here, because it's a debate we've had in the past, Stuart, as to what is the city centre. Is it just the Thistles, etc.? Does it go as far as Cowan Street? Should we include Sainsbury's? So could you maybe give us an idea of what you consider to be the city centre?
Yeah, Councillor. So I think probably what we consider and work on really as the city centre is a wider area than just that core city centre. You know, all the kind of wider and outskirts area play into that directly. You know, it's very important that we consider it all as a whole in terms of interaction and the different facilities that are available. I think probably a good way to look at the core area is actually probably in the revised bid area that they're proposing for their next term, which slightly extends the footprint of the bid area. I think that's quite positive and common sense, because it does reflect that actually the footprint of the city centre is a bit wider than people might assume. So certainly the way we work off it, it's all that area down to Forthside and out, you know, down to Dumbarton Road and all that kind of stuff. So we certainly don't view it as just that core. What some people might think we're referring to in terms of that area around Port Street. You know, obviously we take in the whole Market Cross area and stuff like that, and I think it's very important that we do so. So that's certainly the way officers approach it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Questions? No? Councillor MacDonald?
Yeah, I think that's useful to try and understand what the city centre is. And I suppose going forward in the future, what we expect Stirling to be and why you want to come into Stirling, and what we do as retail declines or changes would be interesting to understand in more detail. I think there's a lot of very positive things in here and lots of useful ideas, but just a picture of that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So yeah, it's obviously something that the strategy, you know, focuses on and understands those trends and how we positively enhance the city centre and take cognizance of that. Obviously, we're very keen to protect our retailers and to protect retail in the city centre, but we also fully understand that retail has changed and it won't ever change back to the way it was. That's just a fact, and there's no point in us trying to you know, focus our energy solely on that. So you'll see from the actions and the strategic objectives in here, it is about focusing on making people want to come into the city centre, even if they don't particularly need to. So enhancement to public realm, new offerings, new attractions, new leisure services, and improving the connectivity around there. So yeah, I mean that's obviously at the front of our mind. How does the city centre have to evolve to make sure that it remains vibrant and attractive, but understanding that in terms of the heyday of it being filled with retail only, that's something that is gone, and the trends are quite clear. And as emerging demographics and changed behaviours come into place, we have to be fully cognizant of that, but embrace that as an opportunity rather than manage decline. We get in front of that and focus on all the positive things. So I'm personally very positive, and I know the officers across the council are very positive about the things you see in the action plan, and the things that are coming forward. I think we'll see significant enhancement to Stirling over the coming years with the things that are already in train. So we can be positive about that and focus on those positives whilst being fully aware that it is a challenging time for many businesses in the city centre, and we continue to do all we can to support them.
Thank you very much. Okay, if that's all the questions, can we agree the two recommendations, which is to approve the city centre strategy and also the supporting action plan? Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
We're now on to the last item on the agenda, which is Stirling Development Agency's annual report. And we have Mr. David Lawrence. I think I saw earlier David joined us, and he is going to speak to that report. Could I just remind members that there are some appendices, and Appendix 4 is an exempt item, an exempt paper. So can I please, if you want to discuss anything at all in Appendix 4, please let me know, and we will then go into private session. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. David Lawrence.
Chair, is Brian Roberts, Chief Operating Officer for Infrastructure and Environment. If I could just jump in there, I'll do an introduction to the paper, and then David can answer any questions from the SDA perspective, if that's okay.
Sorry, Brian, I didn't notice that you'd actually joined us. I'd had indicated that you were going to be late coming in, but I hadn't noticed you joining us. So my apologies.
No worries. Thank you very much. So good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. As Chair has already outlined, this report provides an annual update on the activities of the SDA, and it also provides Committee with an update on the decisions that were taken at the June Council last year in 2021 on the structure of the SDA. So the paper outlines the progress on those, but just for summary, the revised joint venture agreements that were agreed by Council have now been concluded. The legal agreements, etc., have been put in place, and that's now being put in statute with the SDA now operating under those joint venture agreements. There was 2 areas of land that Council agreed would be transferred back to Stirling Council, namely Sink Farm at Cowie and the Paul Mays Park at Fulham. Those processes are underway, and the final stages of legal transfer are going through, and the Council will have full legal title to those by April this year. And also the changes to the Stirling Council directors has been evoked as of October, with the officer stepping down and Councillor Neil Benny being appointed as director. So that change has happened. Council also agreed that 2 sections of the land that the SDA still hold, namely Station Road in Stirling and Mill Hall development site, would be subject to development appraisals that would be undertaken during the next 24 months. So the paper sets out that the Station Road appraisal will be undertaken during 2022, and the Mill Hall one, because of the complexities of that site, undertaken during 2022 and 2023. And obviously on completion of those, that would be considered by the board, but it would also be referred back to Council for consideration of how those 2 sites get taken forward. As Chair outlined, Appendix 4 provides an update on the activities, the current activities of the SDA and current interests, etc. And for obvious reasons, that's an exempt paper because of the commercial and contractual sensitivities of that. The other appendices are public appendices, and they effectively provide the the governance structure overview, the land holdings that have been returned, and also the land holdings that have been retained by the SDA. And as Chair mentioned, David Lawrence, who is the Director of the SDA, is on the call and happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask, first of all, are there any questions on the report? Councillor Beryl.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just a question on this. One of these pieces of land that's to be returned to the Council. It's mentioned at paragraph 2.2 on page 119, the Sink Farm, Cowie. Apologies if there's a lot of background to this that I'm just not aware of. I'm just slightly puzzled as to why Stirling Council is in the business of owning a working farm.
Thanks for the question, Councillor. So the Council has got a number of land holdings that it leases out, including agricultural leases. These sites were previously put into the SDA a number of years ago, before I was involved in it. So I don't know the original history as to why they were transferred into the SDA, but certainly under review as part of the joint venture agreement review and looking at what the purpose of the SDA is and the land that it holds, we didn't feel it was appropriate for the SDA to continue holding what is effectively an agricultural lease, and that was part of the considerations that Council took last June around the return of those parcels of land. So as the paper sets out, Sink Farm, the land will transfer back, and the current tenant will continue their agricultural lease, and in Paul Mays Park that's transferring back for the council to work with the community to look at the best use of that site, because the SDA has been able to progress the Palmays Park for commercial development, and there's a number of suggestions of how that land could best be used in Fulham to benefit the community of Fulham. So it's because of the decisions that were taken last year at council to bring it back into council ownership so that the council can best manage those sites rather than the commercial entity, which is the SDA.
So I'm still just curious then. So it's reverted to Stirling Council. I just wondered, do we have any long-term intentions to continue to own that working farm? I've no objections to it. It just seems a bit of a strange thing, and I apologise if we've already owned lots of agricultural land and operate it that I wasn't aware of after all these years.
We do. So the land would continue under the current tenancy arrangement, and we do own and operate other agricultural tenancies. It might be useful, Councillor, if I get the estates team under Drew Leslie to be a wee briefing note and just explain the areas that we hold and how those are structured.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? No? Councillor Barrow, is that a legacy hand that's up, or do you want to come back in? No.
Yeah, legacy hand, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald? You're on mute, Councillor MacDonald.
Are we allowed to ask anything about the pink papers? Is it basically the numbers in it that we're not allowed to talk about? Or?
Sorry. If you want to ask a question, anything at all on Appendix 4, as indicated, we need to go into private session to do that. So did you want to ask a question on Appendix 4? Right.
I think it'd be just interesting to ask some questions about progress and that kind of stuff.
That's fine. So the members agree that we would now go into private session to consider details in Appendix 4 of the paper.
Chair, if this is a paper for noting, perhaps Councillor MacDonald would be happy to get the answers he's seeking offline. But if not, then by all means go into private session.
Well, we're here, we might as well.
We'll go into private session, and if all members are agreed, is that agreed? We are now going into private session to consider the exempt paper.
Yep.